Hello everyone. So, my name's Dave. I'm on the Immunity Canvas team, as you might imagine. And I wanted to go over the latest version of our BLUEKEEP remote command execution exploit. And what I noticed when testing it is that it takes 10 minutes to run. And aside from that being useful information all by itself, I also want to not necessarily have everyone have to watch it fill up memory. So I thought I would talk a little bit about it, and you can see it here. I just ran it over the last 10 minutes. And on our left is a Windows 7 machine that is 64-bit, as it turns out, but I want to tell you some of the things that are in it. We released this exploit a few weeks ago, but now, like Black Hat has happened, everyone's forgotten how things work, and our new version is so much better that I wanted you to quickly run out, download Canvas, and test it yourself. And of course, if you have not purchased Canvas, then you definitely should. So just to go over some of the interesting things here. By default, if you run BLUEKEEP, you'll notice that I had to extend the screen size because our current dialog box is not quite finished yet. But you have the option to not do the RCE part of the exploit. So by default, it just tests to see if it's vulnerable, which is very useful. So the other thing it does is it will actually remotely retrieve the architecture of the target over RDP. So if the only port available on your remote target is RDP, we can differentiate from 32-bit to 64-bit just using that protocol, which is very useful to do, especially because failure to exploit means rebooting, and that's no good for anybody. So to execute it, there's actually some advanced options here. I didn't use any of them because I'm not that advanced, let's face it. And you can pick the amount of memory the remote target has that increases reliability and speed. But we didn't do that here. So you'll see that once it says I'll remotely detect the fact that it's x64 for you and that it's vulnerable before I start running the exploit. At that point, you then end up doing just a bunch of things. Filling up memory and grooming and releasing. It takes 10 minutes for me, but that's on a local network. So some of the things that I wanted to mention are, obviously we're still heavily at work making this exploit better, but at this point it's reliable enough that I can clicky it, which means it's reliable enough for all of our customers to clicky, and it's 32-bit and 64-bit. I've only personally tested it on Windows 7, but obviously it should work on all the vulnerable targets. I mean, I hesitate to tell the team to install Windows 2000 to test against, but I'm pretty sure it would work. Okay, so, you scroll down, you get a shell. I actually got 2 shells with this run, which is probably a bug that we will fix at some point, but 2 shells is better than no shells, so I'm not really complaining that much. So some of the points I wanted to make. One, you should buy and download Canvas if you want to test BLUEKEEP against your systems right now. The new version is very, very reliable and should work on anything you have. 2, the vulnerability equities process is pretty silly. 3, any exploit is really wormable. It's interesting that this particular exploit received so much attention by everybody. I mean, it is a default remote on Windows 7, which still exists, but is, of course, going to be end-of-lifed in January, I believe. So very interesting that people think that certain vulnerabilities are wormable and others are not. But this one, of course, is fun to have. I'd rather have it than not have it. People questioned a little bit the reason we were working on it, but of course, the reason you do any of these penetration testing products is to make sure your secondary defenses are working as planned. And it is going to be interesting to note what things like CrowdStrike, FireEye, or any, Microsoft's ADP, I can't pronounce their name. It's a really weird name. But those things do against this, because what you'll end up seeing is a process spawning out of LSAS for sort of no reason. In theory, if we don't amend the kernel shellcode to disable your kernel hook, which would probably be an interesting research project for later. And then network location does matter. So, it's very difficult to test this sort of exploit when you're sort of operating across two VPNs and the latency is very long, and then exploit takes 30 minutes to run, and maybe the heap isn't particularly happy with you when you do it that way. The other things I want to test are like, what is a machine under heavy load like? What does it mean? There's a million things left to do in testing, so this exploit will be changing in the future. And of course, if you need support running this exploit, if you're buying Canvas just to test this exploit, Canvas is actually not that expensive. So if you're looking to buy Canvas just to test this exploit, we still offer the same support that we would for anybody, which means you email and our entire dev team will be able to help you out. It's a pretty fun exploit to use. We're happy to provide you this capability, and we look forward to your time with it as well.